So you've got your roots, octaves, and fifths down. What can we add to our bass parts next? I'm going to recommend that you start to look into outlining thirds within your movement in your bass parts. Let's start to dive in, talk about what thirds are and how you can put them within your bass lines. So when we have a chord, like for example, C, E, and G, this would be a root, third, and fifth of a C major chord. The root is like a tree. It's where things are grounded. It's where things feel like home base. The fifth is the fifth note of the scale that it comes from, and the third is the third note of the scale that it comes from. Now, we're not always going to be playing the first chord from a scale. Like in a C major scale, I'm not always going to be playing a C major chord. So when I say that it's the third and fifth of a scale, more so what I mean to say is whatever note you're playing within that scale, let's say we're in C major and I'm playing the fourth note, you're going to go up 2 notes from there and another 2 notes from there. So you find a point, you go up to the third note from that point or up to the fifth note from that point within whatever key you're playing within. In short, up a skip, that creates a chord. Bottom note is root, up a skip is the third, up another skip is the fifth. So that third is going to outline the tonality. If I just play a root and a fifth, sounds fine, sounds powerful, right? We have that sort of chuggy metal power chord sort of sound. But when I add the third, you'll hear down low, first of all, it sounds really bad. So you have to watch out when you're adding thirds. Don't do this harmonically when you're playing low on the instrument. In other words, don't play it together with these other notes. But for now, I'll bring it up an octave. So here's the fifth. And when I add the third, you can hear it sounds major now. Or the fifth, when I add a flat 3 or the third from a minor version of the scale, now I have a minor sound. Now as a bassist, you have a lot of control. If the piano player is playing a C major chord and you play a C, you're really creating a solid foundation below it. If you play the fifth, you're leaving a little bit of sort of open-endedness. It's not quite unresolved, but it's not fully resolved. If I play the third, it's kind of creating a little bit of an extra brightness to that major sound. Or maybe if it's minor, it's leaning a little bit more into that minor tonality. So this would be called slash chords. I'm playing a C major chord and then the bass is playing an E, so it's C/E is how we notate the chord. But generally, I would say for now, like 90% of the time, you're going to want to be focused on the root of whatever the chord is. If the chord is D minor, focus on playing the D. Now, like I said, you could stay on the third, F, and sort of change the sound of the rest of the band. But in this class, what I wanted to get at a little bit more is just the idea of moving through that third. So we talked about the root D and the fifth A. What if I moved up through the F? Okay, I could even come back to that F on the way back down to the D. Now I have this sort of sound. Sort of like a ska bass line, or even sort of a walking bass within a jazz part. But you can hear now the difference is that I'm able to access some of the tonality within my bass part. In other words, it sounds minor. What I'm playing doesn't just sound foundational with roots and fifths, but that third really helps outline that minor or major sound. Now, if you're a blues bassist, you may already know this. This is very important to have this sort of that first part of the sound is root, third, fifth, straight away, and then usually up top a 6 and maybe even a flat 7, this classic sort of bass line. But even just the first 3 notes sort of gives you that 50s doo-wop sort of sound, and it can also lend itself towards the blues. So some styles do use more of their thirds within the bass line, but again, it comes down to active listening. Listen to the bass parts that you want to recreate, try to figure them out on the piano, or even just do a little bit of side research based on that genre and see, are they using roots and fifths? Most likely. How much are they using thirds though? That's going to be important to watch out for. Again, as a friendly reminder, do not play thirds down low. Like the idea of D to F down low, it just sounds messy. You could take the F up 1 octave, so you have D up to F. And that's a pretty common sound to sort of separate the notes, almost like an open voicing on the piano, but really just sort of separating the notes of the chords. So you still have the root on the bottom, but the fifth or the third might be played up one octave. So there it is, not our longest class, but just sort of adding this idea of the third as its own separate entity to remind you that it's used quite often stylistically within certain genres. And what it's going to do is outline more of the tonality, the major or minor of the chord that's being played. Also, if you want to experiment a little bit harmonically, try playing the third or the fifth underneath the chord that's being played. Your guitarist is playing C major, and instead of playing C, you hold the E, the third, or you hold the G, the fifth. It will change the sound. I wouldn't recommend doing this if you're playing covers, but if you're, for example, composing something with your band and you're looking to play around with things harmonically, then that might be a super solid choice. Now, that being said, if you are covering music and the original bassist was using these slash chords, then of course, feel free to use them. So that's it for this class on outlining thirds. In the next class, we're going to talk about diatonic and chromatic passing notes. Now we're really opening up a lot more note choices, and I'm looking forward to telling you what it's all about in that next class. I'll see you there.